All right, everybody, come on in. It's Friday. It's another episode of It's the Democracy Stupid, and I have a treat for you today. Look, we've talked with Ezra Levin, the founder of Indivisible, and I got a lot of comments about how powerful it is when people get out and organize. Not the sort of angry screeds that even I sometimes write, but the happiness that comes with getting together and doing great things. And Indivisible is hardly the only organization in the country doing this stuff. In fact, there are quite a few who are out there building communities with small d democratic purpose. And it's a very, very happy thing. And an organization I want you to know more about is Red, Wine, and Blue, founded by my guest, Katie Pierce. Excuse me for this beeping. I have to turn off a phone. Sorry about that. Founded by Katie Pierce, who is fabulous and who's joining me today. Thank you, Katie, for coming.
Edwin, it's so nice to meet you, and it's really great to be here.
Well, first, how about telling everybody about your journey? I know you've been a journalist and a political organizer and a mom, but you saw a different opportunity to strengthen our democracy than the one that you had been banging your head against for a long time.
Oh, all true. So, yeah, unlike most of the women that I get to work with day in and day out these days, I have worked in politics in one form or another for my whole career. So about 25 years now. When I came out of college, I was working on campaigns. I landed in DC in my 20s, helped build some of the organizations that we really think of as movement infrastructure today. I helped launch Media Matters. I'm sure that's one you've heard of and probably have had some guests on from. And I love that work. It made me who I am. I learned about building strong organizations. I learned about effective organizing and communications for sure. But it was all really work-based in DC, built out of think tanks, a lot of focus on, message testing, figuring out what it is that works, that we think works anyway, and is going to work out there in America, and trying to ship out those solutions. And what I love about what I get to do now is that we are really about finding solutions right here in our local communities. So how I ended up starting Red, Wine, and Blue is that I moved to Ohio 13 years ago with my husband, who I'd met in DC. We wanted to start a family. And I got here and I was still doing the DC thing for a while. And then the 2018 election came around. So everybody knows the story of what happened in 2016, particularly among women. A lot of them got very fired up by what had happened, realized that they needed to be doing more than vote. They did become involved. The 2018 elections, we saw 43 seats in the House flip that election, and 38 of them were suburban. And a lot of that had to do with the shifts that were happening among women, including many of these women getting involved for the first time. So here I was, still engaging in DC, but doing my work remotely into DC, sitting in my house in the suburbs where I'd just become a mom for the second time. And it just hit me after that election, like, why am I still a DC operative? Like, here I am in Ohio, a suburban mom, and I'm hearing about all of this happening in the suburbs around me, especially in people looking at what had happened in that election. And I felt like, okay, my life is here now in the suburbs of Ohio, but I'm still like, my head is still in Washington, DC. And I wanted to shift that. I wanted to get better aligned between what I had become as a person, as a mom, and what I was doing in my professional life. And I thought that maybe merging them could be a pretty cool thing to do. So I started kind of relatively quickly moving towards quitting my DC consulting gigs at that point, and went on a road trip essentially to meet with these women all across my state.
Thank you for that story and for sharing that story. It's so perfect. Washington has a habit of corrupting young minds. You go there as a young person who loves the country, and you end up thinking it is the country, and it isn't. We are out here in this part of the world, and increasingly we're understanding how to raise our hands. The work that you and your members are doing, it's one of the reasons why I'm confident we will finally put an end to this ugly, ugly chapter in our history. Yeah. So talk about Red, Wine, and Blue and what it's become, and how, not just how it works, but I share with people how happy it makes people.
I love that question. Thanks, Edwin.
Mhm.
So it did just start with me driving around Ohio, meeting with other women who'd become newly engaged. Today, it is a community of over 650,000 women all across the country working to fight extremism from exactly where we live.
Wait a minute. Wait. Just say that number again.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
can't believe it either. It's 650,000 women now. We have 800 local groups that women are leading in communities all across the country. So they're in all 50 states now. We work with these groups to help them figure out what they want to work on. We make sure that they get plugged in to other folks in their communities who want to work on these things too, because no one wants to do this stuff alone. We give them training, we give them connection, because the chances are that if you're facing something in your community, somebody else is too, or already has. So there's a lot of that learning from each other that happens. And that's actually where the joy really, really does start. I mean, I think that people are seeking community. They are seeking connection. And, I think that where this sort of comes full circle and where the real lesson is back to the good folks that I used to work with in DC is that what all of this has really taught me is that the most powerful thing in politics, sorry to say it, DC consultants, but it ain't a TV ad. It is conversations between friends. And that is what these women do so well. And Red, White, and Blue is all about being that welcoming pathway for women who maybe have thought, ugh, politics, I don't know about all that, but they care about their family, they care about their community, they care about the world, and they're looking for a landing spot that is going to feel non-judgmental and is going to help them do something. Because most of us out there right now, we want to do something, but figuring out what that is can be a little bit hard. But if you start asking that question with other people who feel that way too, you can get to some answers pretty quick, not only about what you want to do together, but you can actually get to some outcomes, because we really focus on the local. It's so overwhelming right now. And yes, we all need to be calling Congress every single day, but we all know that Congress is not being the most responsive. They're not doing their job. If we focus not only on doing that, but also think about what can I do in my local community? What can I do to make sure our community is prepared if ICE shows up? What can I do to make sure that we have school board members who are going to actually stand up for our public schools? These are things where you can get together with a living room full of people and make a difference, in short order, and that is why we are seeing all of that energy and action. It really does filter up, because these people get involved. These women see the fruits of their actions. Many of them end up running for office themselves. When we first started, nobody would even dream of running for office. Now we've had over 400 women run for office just among our membership. Mm-hmm. So they're doing, they're working on public education, stopping ICE, looking at stopping the spread of these AI data centers, working on still continuing to protect reproductive rights. And all of this stuff is meaningfully happening at the local level. Even if the midterms go great, we're still going to need to be protecting ourselves.
Well, states are enormously important in America, and also something that they forget in DC. The Republicans didn't forget that. They organized in states. We were a little slower to that game.
That's right.
Yeah. Yours is at 650,000 is a lot of people. So it's a big, diverse group. And I assume, like Democrats generally, they don't all agree about everything. So how do you handle the moments when folks don't see eye to eye?
Yeah. It's interesting. Working with Red, White, and Blue, I actually find more unity among our membership than I ever had working with any other group that I have in politics. I think that it comes from women who are so values driven and also very much focused on their own local communities. It is a lot easier to find common ground when you're literally living on the common ground with the people that you're trying to.
I like that. I must feel that.
That's good. Please do. And so the other thing is that we are very much driven from the ground up. We do not, get together. We don't even have a conference room in DC. So there's not even some virtual conference room where we all get together. My staff, we do have 55 women now who we all work together. Everyone works remote all across the country, but we don't have, even some virtual space where we just decide what everybody's going to work on. our entire model is built from the ground up. So we're listening to what's going on in these 800 groups across the country. We're listening to what is blowing up, our DMs in terms of what people want to focus on. And so based on that, we all get informed. We bring in experts, but we never have it just be driven by experts. We draw on what are the experiences of women in our own communities. How are they being impacted by these issues? How do they see their neighbors being impacted by these issues? Who has already contended with this where you live, and what did you do? And we learn from each other. And then from there, we take action. And we figure out, is it more training that we need? Do we need, toolkits on this? Do we need step-by-step guides? If you're wanting to take on a data center that is going to come into your community and drive up energy bills and hurt, create all kinds of bad health and environmental outcomes. What did they do in Pennsylvania if you're facing that now in Ohio?
Yep.
So it's a lot of learning from one another. And I think that what that results in is just a very practical outlook on what can we do? What can we do here? Rather than thinking, okay, well, what is the, policy issue that's being debated in Congress, and what, amendment to this bill am I for versus what I'm not? Like, we're really just talking about, here we are in this community together, and extremism is having a negative impact on our schools, on our kids, on our environment, and what can we do about it?
Yeah. I mean, what that says to me is this lesson that when people get together and talk about their communities, the things that they disagree about turn out to be less important than they thought.
Yeah.
And the things that they share turn out to be more important than they knew.
Yeah.
And it builds civic strength, not just political power. It makes our communities stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I get to see that every day.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. There's so much to do, even when it isn't election time. How do you keep your groups focused and engaged, in the long stretch between elections?
Yeah, that's something that we do at Red, White, and Blue that is really different than a lot of political organizations. So, everyone who works here, we work year round. So we're still there the day after the election, continuing this work. And what I think is so important is that our approach to politics, and this just unfortunately not the case oftentimes with campaigns, it's very transactional. How many doors can we knock on? How many phone calls can we make? Honestly, not even always is focused on like how many conversations are had. It's literally just like how many knocks, how many
literature did we leave in the mailbox?
Yeah, exactly. Right. As opposed to looking at, what is the relationship? How did the conversation go? What happens next in terms of developing that relationship and building community in this place, so that we can maybe for once, not just barely win the election by 50+1, but actually begin to have transformation in our communities that can get us to a better place than we've ever been before. That is, you cannot even think about doing the work that way unless you're doing it year round, unless you're doing it with a focus on community building and relationships. So we try to show up for people as the whole people they are. When we have someone show up at an event or a school board meeting or a city council meeting or at state legislature, that is not all of who they are. They might be like caring for an aging parent at home or juggling their sick kid or anything else. And so we really try to hold events and create spaces for conversations year round that aren't just, what can you do for me? It's like, we want the experience with Red, White, and Blue to feel like it actually gives you energy rather than takes it away. So like just in the last week, and there are primary elections coming up. There's always elections happening for sure. So there's always ways to plug people in, but how we do it matters. So like, I just looked in the last week, like some of the events we've got going on include date night with your ballot, vision boards and ballots, where there's been a homebody happy hour. There's been an unhappy hour. There's been banned book bingo, sip and sparkle. So like, yes, all of this stuff like is about getting educated about an issue, getting engaged on an issue, whether that is what's going on in your primary ballot and how to educate others about that, or getting involved on a public education issue or otherwise. But we're doing it in a way that like meets people where they're at, can feel like a respite rather than just like another demand on their life. And that people are really hungry for that. And we throw around these words all the time, Edwin, like community building and but like what I love about Red, Wine, and Blue and the women in it is just like every single week, the things that they come up with in terms of like actually doing that community building work, and doing it in ways that feel generative for themselves as well as for their communities. So, they've also, they're volunteering at food banks together.
Well,
Yeah.
you build human relationships this way. So I'm guessing that, you've been at this for a decade.
I started Red, Wine, and Blue in 2019. It became more of a national organization about 4.5 years ago. Yeah.
All right. So in 4.5 years, you still have created the opportunity for people to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that in that time, some have gotten sick, some have died, and to prove that this isn't transactional, I bet people took care of each other and reached out to each other and brought food when they needed food.
Yeah.
And those kinds of relationships are essential and have been missing in our society for a while when we just thought we could contract it all out. I think there's a hunger for it, and you are meeting that need.
Yeah. Look, when ICE shows up in a community, the number one thing that we can all do to most be prepared is have a relationship with our neighbors. That like literally we can just like be in touch, have each other's phone numbers, be connected, and figure out what are we all going to do here together.
Yep.
We can have all kinds of groups and organizations, but if there aren't those relationships where we can get everyone connected together, we're going to be lost. And we hear that from experts in authoritarianism, like how important this sort of social fabric is between us. And you're right. One of our staff meeting last week, we lost a volunteer.
Yeah.
She did just in the last week, and we spent time, during that staff meeting where people just sharing memories of the first time she showed up at the event, all of her contributions.
Mm-hmm.
It was emotional, but that's important. That's real life. And it wasn't a volunteer that I knew personally, but I feel like I do now, just because I heard from those on our staff who'd worked so closely with her. And to me, yeah, that is a signal that we are building real relationships, that people are going to be there and show up for each other when it's good, when it's bad. And we have had a lot of bad. And also it means that, you don't even have to, it doesn't take a death or a sick child to have to tap out sometimes too. Like it all can be a lot. And that's why it's so important that we approach this work in a way that feels sustainable. Like it actually gives you energy instead of taking everything away from you, but also to recognize that like, it's okay to tap out sometimes. Sometimes some of our volunteer leaders of groups are just like, I need to step away for a little bit, overwhelmed with the rest of my life or anything else, but that's okay. Cause there's somebody else.
Somebody pick up this. Yeah. That is community building. At its core.
Yeah. And I have to say, Edwin, too, is that I think sometimes people listen to this stuff and they're like, oh, that sounds nice. Great. Kumbaya. But you know what these women also do? They kick ass. They collect so many signatures when the time comes, if we've got to get an issue on the ballot to protect reproductive rights or public schools or stop, gouging. There's an effort in Ohio to try to stop there being any property tax collection, period, which sounds great until you realize that it would mean we wouldn't have, roads and schools and things like that. When these women need to step up and get things done, which is every day of the week somewhere, they are there and they're going to show up for each other because it's not just an issue. It is, they're connected to each other.
Yeah. So I don't think any more people are going, oh, that's so kumbaya about people getting together and enjoying getting together for building community. I think across the country, people are actually hungry to see this happen. And you see, whether it's you or it's Indivisible or other groups organizing, that this 40-year-old story of bowling alone in America, has run its course. And I think we even though we can talk to each other on our phones forever, people are hungry to be in the same room. And maybe COVID taught us that, I don't know, but it's very powerful, and people are recognizing how powerful it is and wanting to be part of it. And you've tapped into that. Yeah.
And this is important too. I think that a lot of the advocacy that we do sometimes, it relies too heavily on the internet. Frankly, though, like Zoom is great. Like I love being able to do this podcast right now and see your face. And like we have all of these settings and technology that enable us to do that. But at the same time, the more technology we have, the more online connectivity and the 24 forever nature of it, people are really craving that in-person connection. So I don't think it's one or the other. We've got to do both. I mean, I know throughout my day today, I've had many interactions with people both in person and online.
Yep.
And so that's how we need to show up for people as well, like how they live their lives. And we need to provide options and flexibility. So I think for a while, previous to the Zoom era, everything relied maybe a little too much on demanding people to show up in person. Then I think we got a little too online with everything being on Zoom. And I'm hoping that we're going to settle in a place that really values both.
Yeah. All right, let's turn to the impact electorally that you've had. I mean, did you have, are you organized in Virginia?
Sure. Yeah, Virginia. Boy, yes. Tuesday was big. We have, I think about 60 local groups across Virginia. This is actually, I love this example of kind of how our whole model works. So yes, of course, they're very motivated to work on redistricting on this ballot initiative that Virginia voted on Tuesday. Several weeks ago, maybe even a couple months ago, what we started to hear from our volunteers and our organizer on the ground in Virginia was actually a lot of concern about confusion. This was a confusing ballot initiative. What is the gerrymandering happening on which side? What are we redistricting for? Why are we doing this? What does this have to do with what happened in Texas? There's something else happening in Florida. A lot of confusion just about what a yes vote meant versus a no vote. Also, the opposition to this very important redistricting ballot initiative was spending millions of dollars. I mean, it was exposed, like Peter Thiel spent $5 million on mailers, claiming that a no vote was aligned with what President Obama was saying, was aligned with what MLK would have said and other civil rights leaders. Just blatant lies, classic disinformation campaign. But there was a lot of money behind it. And again, just feeding this.
I wish I could say I'm shocked. I can't even, I'm not. It doesn't rise to the level of, we know they do this. Yeah. We know they do it. So how do you beat it? And you're talking about that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I genuinely believe that not only are conversations between friends more powerful than campaign ads, they are also more powerful than mailers, which are essentially just, spam in people's literal mailboxes. But we have to tap into those relationships and those conversations and get people aware enough of what's coming at them so that we do get them talking about this. And that we don't just go, well, whatever, it's just politics. Who knows if a yes or a no vote is the same, it is how we should vote. It's all the same, right? That's the intention, right? Is just to create enough confusion that people sort of check out and our side doesn't show up enough to win on these things. And so we did a few things. So one thing was the overall confusion, not only because of all the misinformation like that I was just talking about. Also, I don't know why this happens again and again. We see it all the time, but the official ballot campaign, their signs were filled. They had 35 words on them. The yes was very small. It took up 5% of the real estate of the whole sign, so people were just like, we can't even, there's all these signs everywhere, but we can't even tell which way they're telling us to vote. So we worked with folks on the ground to design a sign where the yes took up about 85% of the real estate of the sign. We made content where we had, our sort of take on the whole confusion is we actually had moms from North Carolina and Texas who have been so gerrymandered that they no longer have a voice. And so they're basically relying on Virginia to give them a voice too, to get our districts more balanced again. So we were creating content with these moms, asking the moms in Virginia to show up for them. People really loved that sense of solidarity, and it helped them better understand how I'm doing this for the greater good. And we just got to work using this network of 60 groups, having events, having conversations, getting people aware of the propaganda that was coming in. And so why we really needed to take action, and that this wasn't just going to happen if we didn't really get out there and start talking to everyone we know. So, the yes vote ended up winning by, I think it was about 90,000 votes, 3 points, closer than I would have liked, but it sure does make me glad that we took action. And it's just a great example of how we do it, because it was not based on okay, let's talk to some consultants in DC about what they're seeing in the polling. It was based on what are people
No,
seeing.
you dealt with a real problem, which was that voters were confused.
Yeah.
And that's not lobbying one way or the other. It's making sure they knew
Yeah.
in this sea of disinformation what
Yeah.
the facts are. And that's enormously powerful. And when a faction benefits from making sure that people don't know what's reality and what isn't, the only way, and you talked about experts in totalitarian thinking, the only way to get past that is through trust.
Yes.
Is through trust, which you have to build, and they have to trust that you are giving them information that really is accurate, and that matters so much.
Yep. Yeah, it really does, again and again. And that's our approach. I mean, we worked in the North Carolina primaries earlier this year as well. We have, I'm in Ohio, we have the Ohio primaries.
I'm going to ask you about Ohio because you're there. I mean, David Pepper is a friend of mine.
Oh, good.
And Amy Acton, I like.
The Dr. Pepper ticket.
The Dr. Pepper ticket. I mean, like but Ohio is a big challenge. You have a state where the voters have affirmed that they don't believe in gerrymandering. Your state Supreme Court even once said, we don't believe in gerrymandering. And it didn't help. Gerrymandered legislatures told them to go jump in the lake and did it anyway and ran out the clock before the last election.
Because we're gerrymandered.
Because we are so harshly gerrymandered, right. And Michigan threw off its gerrymander, and Wisconsin has thrown off its gerrymander. So along the Great Lakes, you're it. That's the last one standing. We need you to like liberate yourselves.
We're working on it, Edwin. I promise.
I mean, so what does it look like in the organizing for the election there?
Yeah. Well, I do want people to notice what can happen in Ohio when we are not in a presidential year. So, in 2023, of course, we had the reproductive rights ballot initiative here in Ohio, and that we won with a resounding
huge win.
And so to me, what that shows is that when there can actually be a chance for voters to express how they feel when it comes to their values, how they feel on an issue, we're pretty mainstream, just like the rest of America. We think it's like pretty common sense to be able to have basic access to reproductive health care. And so we won on that. When we get into these presidential years and when we are just inundated with the hundreds of millions of dollars, that talk about confusion. Nobody knows which way is up around here. I mean, it's just
even in the abortion one, when you have a Secretary of State who tried to make the language on the ballot as confusing and misleading as possible. So you still had to tell people what it meant to vote one way or the other.
But we could overcome that.
It made no sense.
But we could overcome that because it wasn't in the midst of a presidential year where there was the hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, you could actually have a conversation with voters and break through the noise. We also tend to do very well in Ohio on any nonpartisan race. Because again, so like our school board races, for example, they're not partisan. That's not true in every state across the country, but they are nonpartisan here. And we almost every time we need to beat back one of these sort of Moms for Liberty type extremist candidates, we are able to do so because that kind of extremism isn't what people actually want. And so when you can have that works. So
they aren't actually all the moms.
Yeah. So I think that when we have, that's right. And then I think that what happens in the midterms is different. It's somewhere in between these odd years, right? It's not a presidential year, but it's not an odd year where you really can have more of a clear line of communication with voters all across the state. But what we did see in 2018, Democrats flipped 6 suburban seats in the state house that year. The goal in the state legislature this year is in both the state Senate and the state house to break the supermajorities, so that there can at least be a conversation, some negotiation, a little bit of representation of the full diversity of the state. And I think that we do have a shot at doing that. Meanwhile, we have both Sherrod Brown and Amy Acton at the top of the ticket. I mean, you asked about Amy and David. Amy Acton and David Pepper are the governor and lieutenant governor candidates for the Democrats, and they are working so hard. out there. They're really, meeting with voters and
You mean
people.
they're not flying from town to town like Civic?
No, I don't think there's a private jet. No, I do think they're putting a lot of miles on Amy's Jeep. It seems
Yeah.
like that's definitely happened.
Yeah.
But everywhere you look, they are. And look, we know that this is probably going to be a pretty good year for Democrats in 20. If you look at what happened in 2018, people are saying, maybe it looks similar. I think that the more they can differentiate themselves from Vivek, they can make it be clear, not just, I don't think it works in Ohio to just say like, okay, well, we're just like, we'll just be a little bit different than these other Republicans who you've elected. We don't want to, we'll work right alongside Trump. I don't think this is the year for that. And we have seen Democrats try to win that way in the last few cycles in Ohio. And I don't think that's actually what voters want. There are a lot of people who voted for Trump in Ohio who are very unsatisfied, and they're not looking for an alternative who's kind of similar to him. They actually want someone who is not going to do all the things he's doing that have betrayed them and are pissing them off. And so what I'm looking for out of our Democratic candidates, and hopeful we're going to get, is some boldness, some just really, standing up for the people, standing up against ICE, standing up against these data centers, standing up for our reproductive rights. Like, those are not controversial things in Ohio. Actually.
Good. I mean, we had ICE here in Chicago, and they took a Black Hawk helicopter to take down a building. And, we were testing grounds before they went to Minneapolis.
Right.
And we learned how to fight back, and we taught everything we know to Minneapolis. And then they took our lessons and improved upon them 1,000,000%.
Right.
And 2 people gave their lives fighting against ICE there. I'm glad to know that the rest of the country, where they haven't been attacked in the same way, feels the same way.
People don't want that. People still absolutely have differing views about how we deal with immigration in this country, for sure. But there is, I don't know a state in the country, including Ohio, where the majority is not firmly against the way we're seeing ICE behave.
That's so interesting, because I see that too. And yet, as you and I are speaking, the Republicans in Congress are working on a reconciliation bill so that they can fund this for 3 more years without any reforms, without telling ICE they have to obey the law. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, this is something we have worked on a lot at Red, White, and Blue. We don't always engage directly on the federal issues. But we choose our battles. And this is one that we have chosen to engage in. We have had many tens of thousands of women engaged in this fight around the DHS funding bill. And but it's why it's not the only thing we do. I don't have much faith in Congress for a very good reason.
Very good reason.
And so we absolutely have to push there. But at the same time, it's why we are focused on, okay, let's make sure at the local level, who are the nonprofits working with our immigrant communities? How are we making sure that these families are getting what they need? What are we doing working with our school boards to make sure that we have policies that are going to protect kids if ICE does show up at schools? And what are we going to do when it comes to voting to make sure that our, voting spaces are protected? What are we doing to make sure that our counties are not signing agreements to deputize our law enforcement agencies to work directly with ICE? These are all things where we have so much more power to influence what happens around us than we can with our very unresponsive Congress.
Hey, if somebody's listening and they want to join or start a Red, Wine, and Blue chapter, what do they do?
I mean, hit me up, but probably a pretty good place to start is redwine.blue. That is our website. There's no .com, none of that traditional stuff. It's redwine.blue. If you can, just put your information in there and someone will be in touch. You could just email us if you want it, hello@redwine.blue. And we're actually there. There's no automation that's going to respond to you. We're going to respond. So, and also you can look up on our website, just if you navigate to local groups through the top navigation bar, you can see all these groups all across the country. You can join one, you can start one if there isn't one already there, and we will support you every single step of the way. If you feel like you're the only one, I promise you, you're not. We will help you find someone else who lives near you to do this
Mm-hmm.
with. When you're ready to invite people to your launch event or first meeting, we will invite everyone who's already a part of Red, White, and Blue who wants to get together as well. So that living room or that room you get at the local library is going to be a whole lot more full than you think.
And do you have growth goals for this year?
We set them and we always exceed them, Edwin. It's like crazy. And I will say this. Yes, I mean, for example, our group, our network of 800 groups, our growth goal is, 1,000 for this year. But
Yeah.
like every single time I set goals, like they do just get surpassed. But to me, it's really not so much about the number of groups. It's about what they're able to do together. And are we sustaining them in a responsible way that makes the women in them feel really supported? We want when you go to our website and you see that there's a dot near you, we want to make sure that when you click there and you sign up and you show up to a meeting, like there's people there, that there's someone home, and so we don't want this to just be some, dormant dot on a map. So we put a lot more emphasis on the experience of our members, the experience of our groups, and what they're able to achieve together more than anything else. I know that it's fun to I don't really do a formal annual report. Sometimes we make some cool infographics that show the cool stuff we're doing, but it's not as important to me, even though we have exceeded every growth goal I've ever set. That's not the thing I'm most proud of. Yeah. It's the things that when you emphasize what it actually feels like to be a part of the community, the things that happen as a result of that, focusing first and foremost on the experience, as opposed to, okay, you're here now, go do this, give me something. I promise you're going to get a better outcome. You're going to achieve more together. I have seen it over and over again. There's nothing that a group of women and a Google sheet cannot accomplish. So yeah, I would love for anyone listening to come and join us. We always love to welcome new women in.
That's perfect. I mean, healthy communities breed healthy politics, and you're building both. Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.